Hi, welcome to Reset Your Mindset by LifeStance Health. Myself, Dwight Thompson, and my co-host, Nicolette Lienza, will bring you conversations with leading LifeStance Health professionals who will help guide you on your journey to positive mental health and well-being. At LifeStance, we believe in the three pillars of mental health: mental flexibility, mindfulness, and resilience. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Reset Your Mindset by LifeStance Health. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Nikki Lienza, and I am Dwight Thompson. Really excited today to bring you a conversation about something that impacts so many of us, more so than we probably even realize, and so many of our neighbors here throughout this nation. And this episode is particularly special, not only due to the topic, but also due to the fact that we are joined by one of our clients here, a client that has spent some time working with my co-host Nikki Lienza, who has been her therapist for quite some time. And we're just really excited to have her kind of shed some light on her perspective and her incredible story. And so with that being said, Marcella, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Marcella, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about who you are, and just kind of what's good to know about you?
Okay, well, I will tell you this, who I once was. I was actually a broken, shattered piece of glass, but I am a survivor. I'm someone who didn't give up. I'm no longer a victim. I'm married to an amazing man. We have a 12-year-old son and two crazy dogs. And I started my journey becoming a Reiki master to help bring healing to other people.
Incredible. So, we'll get kind of into who you once were, and I appreciate you being so candid with that. And just already you can kind of feel your something that I just feel like we talk about so frequently on this podcast, your resilience.
Yeah.
And it
Sure.
sounds like you certainly have a beautiful family and two crazy dogs. I love to hear that. I have one crazy dog, so I can't imagine having two. Kudos to you. But Nikki, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
can you give us some background from your perspective of what Marcella has meant to you?
Oh my gosh, thank you, Dwight, for asking that. One thing about Marcella and I is that when it comes to therapist and client, some of the best work is done when you feel like you are a very good match with your client. And that is something that I felt that Marcella and I had from day one of when I first met her, that we were a good match together.
Yeah.
Our sense of humor, are just the way we work with one another. We have similar belief systems in some of the things we do believe in. And so it made us for a really great match for one another. And I feel so just very privileged to been able to be the one to kind of walk with Marcella on her journey. And I was just walking one small piece. The amount of work that Marcella has done within herself on her journey it's been amazing. And I'm just very grateful to be able to be part of this conversation and just been able to be a part of her life in her journey with herself. So it's been amazing. So
it sounds amazing. And so let's kind of get kind of into our topic of the day today, which is suicide awareness. And talking about suicide is obviously I mean it goes without being said how delicate it is, but it is so important and has such an impact on so many people. We were talking about just kind of how frequent it occurs just here. I mean, just here in the U.S., it's the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. for all ages. Approximately 123 Americans die every day by suicide. And just thinking about that, like the 10th leading cause, that is so high. And it's incredible how many we know the statistics of how many Americans, just adults, are affected by depression. And how suicide tends to coexist with depression. And one thing that I think is important to us is having these conversations they're difficult. They can be uncomfortable, but they are so important. And so Marcella, you had mentioned kind of where you came from once. So you described it as, your words broken and shattered. And um, what kind of led you to that feeling and that point?
I grew up in a home where there was a lot of drugs and alcohol. There's a lot of mental, physical, sexual abuse. And it was a lot to deal with as a child. And my father had shot my mom 5 times. She survived and he committed suicide.
Wow.
And as I grew up in life and not being able to talk about things and everything's supposed to be hush hush and silent, I just got to the point that I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take feeling unloved. Um, I just felt like it wouldn't make a difference to anybody if I was even here. And there was a night that I just started taking pills and didn't stop till I ended up in the hospital.
So I can't thank you for sharing that. And so that you kind of get to that point. Um, and what leads you then to kind of begin because it's such a long process, right? Like it's such a
Hmm.
the steps are immense. What kind of led you to start to think, okay, how can I begin to cope with some of these struggles?
Well, at first, I didn't cope at all. I just
Okay.
I just kept sweeping that underneath the rug and just
Right.
ignoring it. Um, it maybe became very angry, very disconnected from people, non-trusting. Um, this went on even into my 20s.
Hmm.
And I think the first part when I'm like, okay, I really need to do something was dating this guy. And I opened up to him. I trusted him to tell him about my past. And
Okay.
all I kept hearing was, you're broken, you're broken. And it's like, okay, I'm already down. And now you're kind of pushing me down a little farther. So I started seeing a therapist. And I saw him for a while, and then he had left his practice. So then it was just like I just shut down again. And
Hmm.
then once I had my son, and I'm like, okay, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom. I really need to get help so I can raise this child. So I went to a psychiatrist, and it was like the weirdest experience ever. I just went in, he asked me 50,000 questions. Like, oh, you're bipolar, you're manic depressant. And I'm like, okay. So here, take these pills. So I left that office and I started taking the pills. And I took them for a while. And then when
Hmm.
I moved back home, I was too afraid to open up to find another psychiatrist. So I was just getting the medication from my primary care doctor until she left the practice. And then it's like, okay, now I have to find a psychiatrist. And I didn't.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I got in a relationship with who is now my husband. And yeah, my cheese slid off my cracker. I really lost it.
That's the first I've heard that one.
And
So,
I was just, going down this spiral and it was miserable and we were fighting and it was just awful. And I knew I had to do something. And I was
Hmm.
actually seeing a counselor and she was not a very good therapist. She actually made me hate my husband. So I'm like, this isn't going to work for me. And I said, I need medication. And she said, well, I can't prescribe that. I'm like, well, I need you to find somebody who can. And then she came back and she said, okay, his name is Dr. Elhaj. He's the best of the best. I said, well, give me his
Wow.
number. And that's
Yeah.
when I truly started my journey.
mm,
Marcella, there is so much to unpack there. Thank you for
hmm,
being transparent.
hmm,
That I know is going to be impactful for a lot of listeners. Um, you know, one thing that I find incredible is you kind of pointed out some things that gave you a more sense of urgency to take on a lot of the coping and taking on kind of head on some of the abuse that you have faced. You mentioned your son. where we see so frequently when people kind of are faced with those challenges, it's kind of there's a fork in the road. You can either sort of rise to the occasion, if you will, or that can kind of push you even further away from the ability to cope. So it's just incredible. And
And Dwight, let me jump in here. I'm going to piggyback on it
yeah.
because one of the things about Marcella's story is that her mother, at the very least, was not kind to her, was not a great role model to her. And so with me saying that is one of the things we would talk about within our time together in our therapy sessions was just how has Marcella been able to come through all this and be such a dutiful, tentative, sensitive mother herself when that was not role model to her at all. And that was one of the things that I was like, wow, how look at you. You are an amazing mother. I can see your love you have for your son. How were you able to develop that when you were never role modeled that? And let me, if you don't mind, Marcella, talk a little bit about that. How have you been able to be such a good mom despite not having the best role model of as a mother for you?
Well, she showed me what not to do.
Excellent point.
So
Excellent point.
I wanted to make sure that my son had a better life than I did. And it didn't matter what I had to do, getting healthy mentally, so I could be a better mom, loving him, showing him how much I love him. There's love flying around this house all day long. And
I
we
believe
have,
that.
we do have a saying. Our son came up with it. And it says, I love you more, no take backs. So it's always a challenge who could get the first person. We actually, for Christmas last year, we got him it's an eye chart sign. So it looks like an eye chart, but when you read it, it says, I love you more, no take backs.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is
That's
So,
awesome.
cool.
yes,
Very cool.
I'm stern with him. I'm still, a strict mom, but he knows I love him. I mean, we're
Yeah.
always hugging,
Mhm.
kissing. We have a very affectionate family.
That's incredible. It's
And
admirable.
it was important to me because I didn't grow up with that. So my motivation was just, I want the opposite for my son because he deserves that. I deserve that love. And so does he.
Yeah.
Marcella, let me jump in here and say, I remember how you were able to kind of be matched with me for us to start working
Mm-hmm.
together. And if I'm remembering correctly, you were working with Dr. Alhaj, and then he had left the practice at that time, and you were transferred to Monica
Yes.
Halter, one of our amazing nurse practitioners. And in working with her, it sounds like she was encouraging you to get back into, psychotherapy
She
again.
did. And she is an amazing person too. Loved working with her. But yeah, she did recommend me to start seeing you. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. She's like, you need to make that appointment just in case. And the one day I walked in there, I said, you're right. I'm not okay. I need to talk to her. So that's how I started coming to see you.
And let me say this, one of the things when Monica reached out to me saying, "Hey, I'm referring someone to you," is that she talks so highly about
Oh,
you. And she definitely saw so much in you. And I think that was the thing for Monica, was that she wanted you to continue your journey of healing and really starting to really get down in there with some of the trauma you've experienced. So that leads me to ask, how did you know you started to heal from some of your trauma?
when I could love myself.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the most difficult journey, that journey of just loving
It took
ourselves.
me,
How do you tell us about some of those steps? How did you start to begin to love yourself?
that was, I was very, and I'm still very committed to my journey and my healing. It's very important to me. And I put a lot of time and effort into it, and even just charting my moods. I had this whole spreadsheet made up, and I had all my different moods, and I would chart them like 1 to 10. So when Dr. El-Haj would ask me, I'm like, here's my spreadsheet, take a look. Because it was so important to me. And I think once I started to love myself, I started to open up more. I wasn't closed off about my life. I got to the point that I wasn't embarrassed about my past. And that's when I realized too, I'm like, I can take what happened in my past and shed light to somebody else and let them know there is light at the end of the tunnel. It is a hell of a fight, but if you want it, you want to be happy, you want to love yourself, you can do it. You just can't give up. And sometimes when you don't feel like picking your head up off that pillow, you just have to and keep moving forward. And, just think like, I woke up this morning. I have another chance.
Great motto to have, for
That
sure.
is a great motto to have. And sometimes it's hard recognizing some of those very seemingly minute but really important things of just the opportunity to wake up in the morning. That's incredible.
And I think you've went on now, to go on and use what you've learned and the resilience you've had as you've navigated your own traumas to go on to create a business on your own of helping others. Can you tell us a little bit about your
Well, I
business?
started my business called A Journey Within Me. I'm starting to write blogs and posting them. The one that both of you have read was about Suicide Awareness Month. So each month I'm trying to post a different blog dealing with different topics. I have one coming up, homeless within a home, another one on anxiety, and I'm going to throw some funny stuff in there too. But over the summer, I became a Reiki master. So I am starting my business off with that and to bring healing.
Can you tell us just really briefly a little bit more about Reiki for those who aren't familiar with it?
It's a Japanese alternate healing method. It's energy moving throughout the body. It's very healing. They use it in hospitals for patients that have cancer. It's great for anxiety, depression, chronic pain, fatigue, sleep problems. It can go on and on. It's very helpful for people. You can go on my website and you can actually see testimonials of people that have been receiving Reiki from me and their experience and the benefits that they've received from it.
Great.
That's awesome. What is your website?
journeywithin.me.
So I think it's such a testimony to you of like you sharing, you enduring and navigating your own journey within, and then sharing that to heal others. It's just so moving.
So Nikki and Marcella, let me ask you this. This has been such a candid conversation. We've shared personal stories, and again, circling back to the topic of suicide and trying to raise awareness. How have you both kind of normalized conversations about suicide in your day-to-day life, and why do you think it's important to normalize those conversations?
And Dwight, I'm going to jump in here and say you're saying such a key word of normalizing it. I think there's such a stigma surrounding suicide that people don't want to talk about. It's uncomfortable to talk about. But as you quoted in the very beginning of this episode of like, it's like the 10th leading cause of people dying in America. We need to be talking about this. We need to be having these difficult conversations. And so for me as a therapist, it's so crucial to get the word out there, to talk about it, to normalize it, because people so much suffer in silence. And I think this is where it's so amazing that Marcella is sharing her story, because the hope is that someone listens to this episode and says, wow, look at that woman, look what she's been through. Maybe this will now inspire them to also speak up and get help and talk as well. What about for you, Marcella?
I know it is for myself. It is very hard to talk about. And even though it was in my past, it was so hard to talk about. Like, oh my God, you tried to commit suicide before. But I'm okay. I'm comfortable with sharing that now because so many people are suffering in silence and they don't.
Yeah.
They feel so locked down and just so closed in that nobody's going to understand them. Nobody's going to help them. And it has a lot to do, whatever their background is, what they have gone through and the traumas. of being beat down, where they probably feel like nobody cares. And that's the one thing about writing this blog, was to let people know there is somebody that cares. There is somebody there to talk to, and never shut down. And
Yeah.
it's hard when you're depressed. That is such out of your grasp to even realize somebody really does care. And I think it's important. I think it should be talked about more than just like once a month, the Suicide Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for sharing that. I think it's helpful information. It's important information. And Marcella, thank you for all, not only for joining us, but just for all that you do. All that you've done with trying to reach out and help others, and you obviously have the ability to relate to some people that have struggled, and we've certainly all had our struggles. So I just thank you for all that you've put back, all the good you've put back out into the world, and your strength and story. It's truly incredible, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
sharing it with us.
Thank you for allowing me to share it.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.